But I think, right, or it's my belief, when cops understand people, relationships, and are policing their own community, I'm going to try to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they're going to approach it a little differently because they're trying to build up the community as opposed to tearing it down. But overall, right, I still think the system needs a lot of correcting and correction because, right, now don't get me wrong, if you're out here doing mass killings and things of that nature, yeah, you probably do need to go away. But some people, like I guess in my mind, I'm almost wonder sometimes too, like what does jail actually do for people who have, who do certain crimes? Is it really? Am I any good? Let's say, for instance, let's say, for instance, Eric Gardner selling CDs and cigarettes, right? Let's say, for instance, he was still alive. What would jail have done for him? This man was trying to make a living and take care of his family. He was just trying to make $1.
Right.
So common sense, or somebody who wants to really build a community says, hey, this community is ravished and it needs employment programs. It needs more credentialing and it needs support to this community to help this person out, as opposed to let's send him to jail. What is sending him to jail going to do? If anything, it's going to make it harder for him to get a job when he comes out because now he's a felon.
Yeah.
And I think, right, the enemy, this is how the system is set up. Let's put him in the jail. Now he can't vote to bring somebody into the community who sees the community that way and will upbuild the community. And I think oftentimes that if you're not aware of the system and how the system operates and what it works, you're just thinking, let me arrest people, let me put them in jail, as opposed to let me help them find a better way so that these things don't have to happen, right? Because once again, research and statistics shows the more educated a person is, the more opportunities they have in life, the less violent crimes, at least, right? Because let's be realistic. Rich white people commit crimes every day through tax evasion and all of the above. We just look at it. We just look at those criminals quite differently. But research, and so I say all that to say, right, the enemy in this case, and to the person's argument, is you have set up a system that will never help me grow or get better, or black people grow and get better. Give them the benefit of the doubt and all of the above. And the unfortunate truth is, for many officers, they are trained and taught to buy into that system, and that's how they operate within that system.
Ooh. Press, you're saying something, because I've never put the dots together like this. And I don't even think we can, I mean, we know it from a historical standpoint, like post-abolition, turning towards Reconstruction, you know, there are documented examples of Black communities that were on the up and up. You know, they were education, economics.
Can go on for days. Tulsa,
you know what I mean? Black Wall Street, all of these things, right? And the response to that was a certain kind of law enforcement, a certain kind of law enforcement. It was a system that was being threatened and said, how can we respond to this? And we're going to use certain instruments. And I've never put that together to say, you know, we've seen that tactic even in recent years. If there's progression, if there's something that doesn't look like or threatens the system that we want to remain, then we have various tools. And I think we're intentionally talking about just one of them, because there are others as well. I mean, I think we even saw in, this is why, you know, Sister Stacey Abrams is such a heroine and a hero for many of us, because she saw the system using another tool, voter suppression, and said, no, we're going to come against that tool. So I appreciate on a personal level, because it's helped me. It's easy to fall into a trap. And I'm not saying Dr. Litwack is setting this trap, but it's easy to just use language that doesn't force you to think. Is the law enforcement agency the enemy? And your step back to say, let's look at it like this. Could it be an instrument? I mean, it just opens up your thinking. It doesn't justify the very things that we've talked about, right? It doesn't say that, okay, well, you know, it's really the system. No, I think there's a lot of both and to this, but it does prevent us from being too narrow in our target of conversation, because there are things that are more powerful that are at play here that need to be addressed. So that's good synthesis, man.
Yeah. And which is right, which is also why, and I've met some black people who are like, how could a black person ever be a cop? But I'm like, nah, I actually prefer you to be a cop.
Yeah.
I prefer more black people to be a cop, because hopefully you're aware and woke enough to come into the system and say, that ain't right.
Yeah.
But now when I deal with people in these communities based on what you're telling me I need to put them in jail for or do certain things, I'm going to be like, nope, I'm going to go and do something else. Like, I'm going to help build up the community. Right. And it's just like this is something I constantly struggle with. And I had a conversation with a friend a while ago, right? It's like that, finding that balance of being at the table. Like, am I selling myself out for being at the table to make a change, even if that change isn't as large as I might want it to be, right? Because everybody's going to look at you and say, hey, how could you allow that to happen? And if you had the opportunity to be at the table, you can say, well, look, before they were only going to give us a little centimeter. But because I was at the table, I managed to give us an inch. I managed to get us an inch. And I think that's right, the thing about social justice, and that's what makes it a little hard. And even this policing thing, right, is that to your point, to the point that we made earlier with the Derek Chauvin case, it's like we took one step forward, and then that night with the killing of Miss Bryant, we took 2 steps back. It's like every time we take a step forward, we take 2 or 3 steps back.
Yeah.
But it's like, hey, being at the table sometimes helps. It helps for us to be present, to be in the table, to be in the room for lawmaking and things of that nature, because it is going to be a slow and arduous process in getting that change. But it can be a change that happens, right? And I would even argue, hopefully, a change without a loss, without a life being lost.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know who you took second semester freshman year for the research paper. I took Dr. Ramona Hyman, and she actually gave us the topic that year. We could choose any subject within this topic umbrella, but it was on something to do with Black history. And this is kind of really when my interest in the legal connection, the judicial connection with law enforcement really took off, because as I was diving into history myself as a young African-American male trying to get become college educated in Alabama, right? My eyes were just open to the disparities. And now I ask myself, when I hear people talking about defunding the police, and even some saying abolish the system altogether, right? I read something here recently, and I believe 9 out of 12 of the council members of the Minneapolis City Council have voted in favor of dismantling the Minneapolis Police Department in Minnesota. So it's have me in a space where I'm just thinking about, okay, how do we turn the corner? Because we've been sitting here for an hour and change now, talking about our own personal experiences, causes for pause and concern. But I think in order for a conversation to add to its constructive criticism, it's like, what am I suggesting? What am I offering? What needs to change? And these are things that people are offering. I think we should put a lot of things on the table. Defunding the police, let's explore it. Abolishing it, okay, if it's abolished, then what is put in place, right? Because like you said before, no one's saying that there isn't real crime, that there aren't atrocities, that there aren't levels of abuse. Heinous stuff goes on. Trafficking, yes, we need measures. What we're trying to prevent is unnecessary loss of life. You know what I mean? So for me, and I'll put this on the table, I definitely think there needs to be great greater diversity in terms of interdisciplinary cultural competence for officers.
Yeah.
And I would say lawmakers as well, but definitely officers. I think if we're not noticing anything at all, man, where there is cultural conflict or polarization, man, the potential for a life to be lost is always greater, because you're not coming to a different culture with certain things that are going to help you assess. I mean, you said something earlier already, that you and I know people, we have people in our families, no judgment. It's what they're loud, right? You catch you and me at the right time, we're going to be loud too. But man, help me if my decibel level places my life in any more danger. Like, that can't be a criminal characteristic, but it can be a cultural characteristic that one would do well to know of, so that you don't have your pride checked if you say, hey, listen, yes, my decibel level is loud, but if you ask anybody, don't you think they might be a little bit more passionate about these things? So cultural competence would be one of mine. For you, what are some things that can help turn the corner to give us a maybe more hopeful future that might redeem, if we can use that word, the times?
Yeah. So this is going to be controversial, but for all the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't completely, I think I had a similar reaction to, like, a lot of people when they heard the word defund the police, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I did some reading, and I probably should have already known, but I think I knew. I think the word defund really throws people off, right?
Mm-hmm.
But technically, the government defunds things every day.
Sure.
They defund education,
Yeah.
quite a bit, right? They defund, you name it, they defund it.
Mm-hmm.
And all that is essentially doing is moving money and resources. And I think, right, just as much as we give tactical training to our police officers, we need to give them people training. I think half the reason why they struggle is because they don't know how to deal with people, and they don't know how to talk to people. Right. The way to de-escalate a situation is not with your gun. Right. Even if you understood at the bare minimum, I think if you understood how most Black people perceive cops and felt around cops, that when you go to answer a Black situation, you would come in completely different.
Yeah.
Right. So I think understanding people, training people, right? Then I also think they need to begin to implement some racial bias courses and things of that nature. Like, you need to understand where your biases are. We all have them. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
No,
yep.
White, Black, Asian, Hispanic, everybody has them. We all think something different about other people we don't know, even about people within our own culture, right? Just by looking at them. And you have to be checked on that. I think, right, some more funding needs to go to, it does need to come from the cops, and it needs to go into like healthcare. Get some social workers on your team. Get some people who understand mental health on your team, right? I don't even remember the gentleman's name, but I can remember a couple of years ago, one incident, the man was naked and had a knife.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, man. Like, you have to know without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
Something is not right with this guy, because he's completely naked running on the streets with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
Your first instinct shouldn't even be to shoot him.
Right.
Because so something right there tells me there are gaps in how you understand people, how you deal with people. Or, right, even to a certain extent, because I do understand that it's a high stress job. Maybe you need to take a stress test before you work.
Yeah.
Or something to that effect. And if it's too high, go home.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to be out on the streets dealing with these people. But then, more importantly, right, and my favorite is if you know that there are communities that are riddled with crime, with poverty, with a number of things, let's work to build up those communities as opposed to continuously tearing them down.
Yeah.
You know, like instead of putting so much money into the police force, put some money into a community center so kids can have some place to go, so kids can have some place to learn. Even adults can come in and learn how to build up their resume. And so adults can come in and learn how to, get jobs, prepare for job interviews, and to get trainings and credentials. And it's funny, right? Because Black people did it. The Black Panthers did it. They were criminalized for it, and we saw them as one way. But I think going back to that enemy, right? It seems as though sometimes we would rather criminalize people and benefit off of making them seem less than and criminals than to uplift them, to educate them, and to help them advance in society. And I think, right, that's what it really boils down to. And I don't necessarily know, because I can't speak for cops, right, and all cops. I don't necessarily know if cops even see it that way. But that's honestly what it is, right? Because they're not, they're not just driving around in affluent neighborhoods.
Right.
Because in their mind, they're saying, well, these kids have something to do. Their parents have something to do. They're busy. They're educated. They don't have time for all of this. But when you giving kids no options, there's nothing for them to do. They can just hang out on the corner. Then, of course, trouble's going to find them. What is this saying? The itemize the devil's workshop?
Yeah.
So I can't really expect them to, I can't expect certain people or communities to really grow if, one, right, not only if you don't give me any resources, but you're also taking people out of my community.
Yeah.
If you're taking mothers and fathers away for whatever, how can children grow? How can children learn? How can they provide for their families? It's impossible, right? And I'm even thinking about this one. I remember it was probably last year, I think, or the year before. They arrested a girl because she had her kids like in her car with the window down. Or no, one girl got arrested for having her kids they were in the mall. They were sitting at a table away from her. She was sitting down doing the job interview, trying to get a job. And they considered that neglect. But it's like, hey, I'm trying to make gains in life. And once again, people, I think it's a people situation.
Yeah.
If I'm a cop, I'm from your community, I understand people, I'm going to show compassion, right? I'm going to be like, man, you're really struggling. And I think, right, that society has tried to do that sometimes where they'll say, all right, well, let me show some compassion. But the unfortunate truth is you have to go and look for it. White people get the benefit of the doubt. I don't have to go and look for compassion for white people. The Capitol riot showed that white people don't have to look for compassion. Because had there been a Black Lives Rally matter, there would have been riot gear out there. There would have been things there would have been tanks, and that's a good example, right? I hate to kind of veer off, but let's come back there for a second. When those things happened with Mike Brown and Ferguson and all of the riots, I saw machines and tactics that are used in war. I saw tanks, Rich.
Yeah.
In Black neighborhood, tanks. All of these groups of white people, who might I quote, a lot of them, I was looking at 60 Minutes the other day, are tactically trained.
Yeah.
Were at the Capitol and broke in, and all you saw were Capitol police officers.
Yeah.
Because they get the benefit of the doubt, even when it comes to shootings, right? Compassion. The guy in Atlanta who shot up the parlors, the massage parlors. When the police officer goes and talks about it, he says the man had a bad day.
Had a bad day.
Yeah, Dylan Roof shoots up the 9 people in
Mother
South
Emmanuel.
Carolina. Yeah, in Emmanuel. He's in the car on the way to get booked, and he requests for Burger King, and they stop at Burger King to get this man something to eat. Compassion. Yeah. And so I think far too often compassion is not within the Black community or shown to Black and minorities, because I would even argue right there, a lot of Hispanics might not get that same compassion either.
Yeah.
But it's not shown there. And so I'm saying all that to say, like, you got to have some people training. Like, to me, that either shows that you're either racist, and you might not like that term, but you're either racist or you just don't really know how to deal with people at all. Because my thing is, if you're a police officer and you're scared of Black people, then you don't need to police that area. I'm not going to go out as far as to say you shouldn't be a police officer, but you don't need to police that area. You need to go find another area that is lily white, maybe go to middle of America or places where there are not high populations of Black people or a Black community, and go someplace where only white people are. But I don't think, right, that we're in the space to do all that. And so I am not against defunding the police at all. I think, right, that it probably is a great option and should be looked into and considered, for the simple fact that those resources that we're putting into guns and we're putting into cars and we're putting into things like that shouldn't be the case. That's one. Two, I think we need to reevaluate stopping people in some of our law. Well, reevaluate stopping people, how we stop people, why we stop people, all of that. If they're speeding, mail them a ticket. Wow. Just like you do if I'm parking. Just mail it. If I'm double parked, just put my ticket on the thing, call it a day. Certain things like that. And maybe I'm speaking out of ignorance because there's some complexities behind it, and I'm sure there are. But like, I shouldn't lose my life over a speeding ticket.
Right.
I should not lose my life because my tags are expired. And things of that nature. And so I think that that's important. And I had one other thing that I wanted to say that I think would also help solve, but I kind of forgot it, and I'm mad because it was just in my head. But I think like those are really some things we should. Oh, last but not least, right? That's what it was. We cannot, in situations like when someone is killed, we can't allow the own police department to administer all of those types of things.
Wow.
Right. Because they're going to protect their own. And to a certain extent, right, if I'm being honest, I'm not actually that upset about it. When you think about it from a logical standpoint, most of the time we protect our own. We protect our people. Let's be realistic, right? And it's okay if I get crucified for this. When I'm watching the game show, I'm always going for the Black family. It's just innate. And I think,
boy, I'm shaking my head because it's like, if that's not the truth.
and so, right, the same goes for like my precinct. If I know, he might not even be my partner, but somebody within my precinct shot somebody, and probably even in my state or my city, if I know they shot somebody, I'm going to try to help them out. I'm going to try to cover it up. I'm going to not, I don't want to see them. I don't want to see them shot. I don't want to see them this, because at the end of the day, right, I might look at the situation and say, well, that could happen to me. And so I want somebody to have my back when it's time. And I think the system has to be logical enough to realize that that's what happens a lot of times. And so they can't conduct their own investigation because they're going to protect themselves. And I think, right, that right there is, I think that's a problem. And then last but not least, too, some of the vague, I don't think we should be at vague in our laws, right? Because it gives police officers too much leeway.
Oh, yeah.
right? And I understand it's a high stress level job and there are things that come with it, and that's perfectly fine. But you can't be as vague as to say all you have to say is I feared for my life, so I shot,
Yeah,
or
reasonable suspicion.
yeah. Like those are, to me, right? Those are almost like code words because 9 times out of 10, that's what you say when you're killing a black person.
Yeah.
Or you're in a situation with a black person. Right. And I think it's it's easy to get off on that because you can't really dispute it.
Mm-hmm.
Dead or alive, right? When you really think about it. Because if I manage to make it through, how can I really justify, right? Like how can I say you're not
Right.
scared for your life? And a good example that I can think of, I could think it was a guy in Florida. He worked at a center, a healthcare center, and it was an autistic guy who got away. An autistic guy was in the middle of the floor, in the middle of the street, playing with a car and all of that. And the guy came out, and I guess someone called the cops. And the cops was telling the autistic boy, lay down, put your hands up, da da da. And the black guy's like, he's autistic. He can't understand. Like he can't follow directions like that. Like it's just not in him.
Right.
And the officer shot him. And of course, right, if I'm not mistaken, the officer was on paid leave and all of that. But no, you need to something needs to happen to you more than that.
Yeah.
Right? Because your rationale can't be, well, he didn't follow instructions. I don't think that's a good enough reason to really shoot somebody.
I'm with you. I think your proposals all carry weight and they're diverse enough that if attention is given to one of them at a time, I think that attention should be given to all of them, but one of them at a time would make a sizable difference. And again, kind of full circle now, because some people could say, oh, well, you're just looking out for your own. We admit that that's a bias. Like, I don't want any more black people to die. Forgive me. Yeah. I don't. But at the same time, this has more to do with placing America at risk. I mean, if this is the culture that we want to perpetuate, then at some point, cultures, cultural lines, systems, like they don't obey us just because we say, hey, listen, this is only going to be targeting black people. Like, man, that thing could turn around, and people have used terms before, and I'm not trying to use these terms to be provocative. People always talk about how, man, sometimes it feels like we're on the brink of some kind of civil war, right? That we're on the brink of, and it could look different than the historical Civil War. But the point is, like, when we see repeated instances, traumatizing images, like you said, man, tanks, military wartime grade machinery on public streets, passing mom and pop shops, like, this is not Call of Duty. This is an actual U.S. space over against the very lack of response. And people were saying, black people are outraged because this Capitol was stormed. Did they want people there to lose their lives? And I'm sure that there are some black people who were like, yes, that wasn't me. What I was saying was, I was a part of the group of people who was more like, see, it's all about, like, again, semantics. No, yeah. I didn't want them to lose their lives. I'm grateful that they were able to go back to their families in principle. My thought was, we know that if there were black people, there would have been loss of life. There would have been a different response. That's the problem. So if you want to back translate that or reverse translate that and say, oh, so you wanted them, it's like, no, I want that if black people, and I don't want black people to do this, but if they did storm the Capitol, I would want us to have at least a fair chance at being escorted down the same steps we stormed, told to get into your car, and also, listen, I'm okay with a black person being held liable for that breach of property. Like, yes, they need to be, something needs to happen in the same way I think needs to happen in this case. But we see all these different examples, and you don't even have to infer long and hard. You don't have to think deeply. Like, there's a disparity. So my point is, what you've offered, I think, pushes us in a right direction. Compassion. It's funny because it's like, as black people, I think you have to kind of celebrate and reflect at the same time. So every now and then you'll get on Twitter or Instagram these kind of viral videos, and it'll be like, oh, look, the cop is playing basketball with the kids. And DeShawn, I just kind of be like,
Yeah. Doesn't mean much. It doesn't amount up to a hill of beans to me.
like, okay, cool. But why is that like the preeminent example of like relationship? If that's our true north, then friends, we've got more work to do. I'm not knocking it. Sure, let's play ball. But I also know that brief exchange where the cop drains it from deep and, the guys laugh like, oh, snap, or he's dribbling the ball. Like even in that instance, and it's almost like, it's like very ironic. Even in that instance, the cop is still weaponized.
Yep.
That could change from a game very quickly. And that for me is why I look at it, but I don't invest too much in it because I'm like, yeah.
So you know what's funny? You know why I actually usually don't like those videos? Because I'll never see it in the white community. And the reason why I'll never see it in the white community is because one, cops don't patrol white communities like that, affluent white communities like that. And two, those same white kids are never outside playing hoops because they probably have some community center nearby where they can go inside and play at a very nice facility.
Yeah. Yeah. It's deeper, right? It's deeper.
Yeah. It's a lot deeper than that. Yeah.
Hey man, listen, I think that this is a good starting point. And friends, the conversation, like we told you, was going to kind of bounce around between two poles. We were wanting to draw from our experiences and just really kind of, this is to a great degree an exercise in self-care for the Black community, because I think it's so easy to go in with it, and just internalize and suppress or just be in your own thoughts. But honestly, as we were talking, I was like, man, I think this is maybe the longest I've been able to talk with someone, at least since the Chauvin verdict. And even about other things, just to kind of explore and also to get to a point, because I think for me, a personal practice of mine is like, I don't just want to stay on the side of the quote unquote good feelings of being angry. Like it can feel good at times to be like, I'm upset. The system is horrible, needs to change. But like, okay, I also need to exercise that muscle that says, well, put some brain power into it. What are some things that can be different? Because at the end of the day, like, I think that in a perfect world, we can begin to think about what race relations, law enforcement, civilian relationships could look like. But the world's not perfect and it's not going to be perfect. So we have to ask ourselves, in an imperfect world, what steps can we take towards saying, listen, beyond principles, the practices of these principles really are transformational. I mean, the language that you have used, man, to capture change, some people might be like, oh, come on, compassion. Like, no, think about it. Think about it. Isn't that at the very heart of transformation? Like laws don't guarantee heart change. This is why stuff has been on paper for, centuries going on. Some stuff beyond centuries. And we know that laws are one thing, but it's really the internal work that needs to happen. And cultural competency, being mindful of how that point about the local precinct not being responsible for managing cases, man, that's deep. That's profound in my mind, because it speaks to the fact that no matter what you're in, and I'm trying to think how to say this. No matter what profession it is, we need to be mindful of that. It can be any profession. And if there are allegations, or if there are actual factual, like documented proof that things, crimes were handled, if I'm a perpetrator or if I am a suspect, even, I'll put myself out there. Like, I don't need to be the one handling my own case, in the sense of like, hey, wait a minute, maybe somebody else should kind of come in and deal with this, because this could kind of, the optics, one, but then two, it could kind of unintentionally exacerbate trauma and stuff like that. And so I think you're right, man. But we could honestly be on, man, another several hours just peeling back the layers of this one instance. I want us to come back again and talk about other things, because we intentionally kind of landed on change on this side of the conversation with law enforcement. But you kind of dropped some teasers, man. We got to talk about education. We got to talk about, what emerges from the Black community. Because you and I have
Yeah.
talked about this before. Like, we can't only wait for systemic change, systematic change. We can't only wait, even as we should push for law enforcement change. You know, I think that there is a great degree to which, hey, while that's happening, whether or not it happens, there's some things that we can be doing for and in and with our communities that says, you know, we might not have the same luxuries or privileges to be able to just, you know, take, like you said, one step forward and just take that step forward. We might have to negotiate life as those who, yeah, you might take 2 forward, but you might have those occasions where you got to take 4 back. So how do we, as Black men, because I think we laugh about it every now and then, we're not 18 anymore, you know,
Yeah.
we're definitely in that season in life where we are recognizing that we have a great level of influence, especially over younger Black men who look up to us, boys who are trying to say, hey, how are you able to make it? I never thought that I would be an image like that to someone, like, you made it, you know, but there are teenage boys who are looking at this stuff and they're saying, I want to make it to my early 30s. And so what's my responsibility to them? So we got to come back and explore some of those things, as well as sports and lighter things, lighter fare as well.
No. I'm all for it, right? Because even I'm thinking of some stuff that I said, like as far as like building the community and just like, and this is a whole nother touchy subject, just around like how, at least during the civil rights era, like the church was that safe haven, that mecca where people could kind of turn to help with the uplifting of the community. And unfortunately, that's no longer the case, right? For a lot of people, they don't see the church as that anymore. And I even wonder now, right? What is it that Black people see as a place where they can turn for that uplifting and for the building of that? And I might argue, right, options are kind of few. But would love to come back and right and talk about that, and even education, because I think my view on education would surprise a lot of people, especially someone with a PhD. I don't think of education necessarily in the general sense of sitting in a classroom and reading, writing, and arithmetic. So yeah, man, like I think, and I think too oftentimes, right, that's what's presented to young Black people. Like, no, you need to go to school. You need to learn how to read. You need to learn how to write. And yeah, you do need to learn you should know how to read, and you should know how to write and comprehend. But every kid, every child that I talk to, I don't expect them to go to college. I'm not even telling you should go to college. There are other valuable options out there, right? And there are other options that could give you a very nice, comfortable, great life.
Definitely.
You know, I'm learning in this world, you can make money if you're good at whatever it is you do.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very true.
If you find something that you're good at, if you find your niche, you can be successful in ways that you can't even begin to fathom and imagine, right? And I don't think that a lot of kids, a lot of people growing up who don't have that influence understand that and know that. And I think that that's kind of tough, right? Because I've met a lot of people our age, some of our friends, right, who found that out after getting a degree,
Right.
multiple degrees, right? And they were like,
Yep.
man, what I'm doing now, I didn't even need a degree for, and I love what I'm doing. But and I think, right, that those are some conversations that need to be had with students, or not even students, children at an earlier age, so that they can begin to kind of live out their dreams and succeed and do well. Because the unfortunate truth is, I'm not sure this problem of policing is going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
And the honest truth, right, is there are a lot of things in America that I'm hopeful for. And I'm hopeful for it because I realize that one day it's a white people's problem. It'll spill over into a white people's problem.
Right.
And whenever it's a white people's problem, that's when we look at it, to your point, as an American problem.
Right.
And we have to address it. White people love the police, man. So I think I think the way I think the way I think the way, and not all white people, but there's a nice percentage of white people in America that love the police.
Sure.
And I honestly just think that to a certain extent, policing will never be a white people's problem the way it is a black people's problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, I hope it doesn't. That's the thing. Like, I don't want, black young white males to be targeted. We're talking about, but I'll pause there. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I mean, I definitely, I agree. And I get what you're saying, but I think ultimately it is my prayer, my hope, and you're seeing it to your point, right? With people like Stacey Abrams, Raphael Warnock. I hope that other black people get into politics, become, the police chief and things of that nature, and begin to infiltrate these systems to change laws and practices, to begin to kind of change it and make it a better place for all people, right? Because at the end of the day, it's always going to be a problem. Because I might argue, hey, and right, this comment, you might not agree with it. A lot of people might not agree with it. That's perfectly fine. But I would argue, if white people feared the police or felt the way about the police the way we do, that they probably wouldn't go on as many mass shootings as they do. Because they know they wouldn't make it out alive. Like, you don't really see black people do the whole mass shooting things. Not to say that we don't, but disproportionately, it's a white male.
Sure.
Right. And I think there are some reasons behind that. And examples have not been made of them, and just a number of other things, right? Whereas in black people, the example is very simple, such as a traffic stop and a life is lost. And so because of that, we're on edge at all times. We're on 10, and I think that shouldn't be the case. But I also realize, right, I'll say this and be quiet. I also realize it's difficult, right? I'm not so narrow-minded that I don't realize and know that being a police, I put my life on the line every day I step out and I put on a uniform, right? I understand, and I'm not ignorant enough to sit there and think that sometimes it is a 1 second, if I don't make this move, my life is gone. I'm not so ignorant, right, to realize that there are some issues and things that take place within police officers that that happen. I think one, they need to be more vocal about that, but also think that sometimes that these things aren't as black and white as they once appear, and that it will take, right, some harmony between the black community and police officers for us to come together and things to actually work in everyone's best interest. And you don't really see it enough. But I also think, and I hate to beat up cops again on this, but I also think some of it is because they're not willing to admit when they're wrong in a lot of situations too. I think some of that comes down to we handle, that, and I hate that we keep talking about this, but when I was looking at the case and waiting for the verdict to come right, one of the big things that I read about the next day was the blue wall came down. For the first time in history, right, or for the first time in a long time, you actually had police officers within the precinct, within the state, with across the United States that said Derek Chauvin was wrong. He shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z. He should not have done this. He did not handle the situation well. Far too often, there are not enough cops that come out and speak against those things, right? And if they do, they're blackballed. Their pension is taken away. They're outcast within their precinct and things of that nature. Like, I get to your point, right? You have people that are in your family and friends that are police officers. So they'll sit there and tell me, oh no, this cop was absolutely wrong. He shouldn't have done it this way.
Right.
He handled the situation poorly. But far too often, those types of conversations aren't had. And
Mhm.
once again, the person who is dead is often the one on trial. And it was, well, why did they have a knife? Well, why did they run away? Why did
Right.
they talk back? Why did they ask what did they do wrong? Why did they do this? And it's like, well, we'll never know because they didn't get to live to tell their side of the story.
Right.
So now let's ask the person who did that work, who actually pulled the trigger. Why
Right.
did you do this? Why did you do that? What were you thinking? And I don't think those conversations are had enough either.
Yeah. Yeah. You hit a chord, man, that it came to mind a couple times in our conversation. I'm glad you said it because, again, I think that the challenge and the necessary challenge is to pursue the best version of yourself living in this environment while also appealing to the nation and then maybe even smaller, your own community for justice, equality, for movement and the necessity of conversation.
Yeah.
That can be something that is often hard, but I don't think that there is much transformation without conversation. And that means that we've got to share space at the table. And that means that just as critical as I'm being of you to not be trigger happy, I also have to be critical of myself to a degree. Well, let me not qualify it like that. I have to be critical of myself to say, okay, am I just going to several years ago when I was in high school, somebody called me, oh, you're going to be an angry black preacher. And I guess what they meant is, are you only going to be controlled by one emotion? And, I get what they're saying. And I think that it's okay to be angry, but that anger can inform certain constructive practices. And so as you've invited us to say, listen, change is going to need to come by way of church, community, law enforcement, lawmakers being able to say, listen, all of the weight of responsibility doesn't have to be in the hands of law enforcers. Somebody might say a part of why we're seeing what we're seeing is because they have been given legal authority to handle things that they should not have to handle by themselves. Like, let's look at this thing as a collaborative, cooperative effort. You have a job to play. You have a role in this, but man, you don't have to take on everything. Point in case, as a pastor, man, I was sharing this with somebody recently. And real quick illustration, I was saying that I am actively learning and appreciating. I mean, when I learned this in school, it was like breath of fresh air. So for me in my pastoral ministry, my pastoral practice, referring people to counselors is like bread and butter. Are there instances where I am a pastoral counselor? Yes, that to be clear has a lot to do with providing theological insight, being someone who comes alongside in a pastoral sense. Hey, I'm going to pray with you. But it very much means I recognize, listen, that there are situations and circumstances that as a part of my cultural milieu, as a Black pastor, I mean, I don't know, illustratively speaking, 85% plus of my people are going to come to me first. Yeah. Right? You're the pastor. Not only do you know the Bible, but I'm going to ask you about anything from grave plots to, what kind of seasoning to put on the fries or the fish to, pray for my daughter who has a mental health illness and, all these kinds of things. And so I have a responsibility to not only feel those, but to know, hey, listen, people might come to you first, but they're not coming to you finally. And if you can say, hey, there are other resources out there. I just think about that with law enforcement. Hey, guys, listen, your job is stressful. Your job is rough. You probably deal with more, I don't know the physiological term. It's escaping me right now, but you're dealing with more stress on an average daily level than most people. The unknown. Will I come back home? And I must say this, not only do I have friends who are law enforcement, but I have friends whose parents have been blessed to finish careers as law enforcers. And they have really been agents of change in the community. They've been a trustworthy person. I just want to say that. And not as a throwaway, not as an aside, but in all honesty, yes, I know that there are persons out there when they lace up, when they put on, they're out there really to make a change. And unfortunately, a large part of this, ominous shadow, kind of covers that. That being said, I think that is acknowledged and change is called for when you just kind of held the light over, we can't escape conversation, man. I think that's a necessary thing to put forth, because even that is a necessary practice. Well, I don't want to talk to him. Well, let's explore that. Let's get to the roots of like why we don't want to and how we're going to have to for our generation, for generations to come. Because if not, we're only going to perpetuate certain things. And at a certain point, we'll become complicit, and we don't want that. We don't want that. Man, we got to come back.
Yeah, let's definitely. I agree.
This has been good, man. I appreciate you, my brother. Like I said at the top, friends, you're going to be seeing and hearing more from DeShawn as we go forward this season and in subsequent seasons. I appreciate you as always. If this is your first time, thank you for hanging out with us in the living room. Please do leave a comment, like this, share it, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that. For our regulars in the living room, you know how it is. You know what we do. I thank you so much for being committed to becoming the best version of ourselves, best versions of ourselves. And this was a deep dive, a sensitive topic, but I hope that you've benefited from it. I hope that you have expanded your own current positions, maybe even been challenged. I hope that you are willing to have these kinds of conversations with your friends and with your family members. Put yourself out there in a safe way. Seek to be constructive and transformative. And I do believe that one conversation at a time, as we seek to do our honest part, that we can see true and lasting change in the worlds and in the spaces that we occupy. Again, thank you to my brother, my friend, Dr. DeShawn Preston. I will drop his information there in the show notes below so that you can have a chance just to connect with him as well. You'll be seeing him again. I have no doubt about that. That's all we have for this episode of the Living Room Podcast. Continue to listen, continue to learn, and continue to live. We'll see you next time.